and Dr. Panesi, Vince, and the members of the Canadian COVID Care Alliance who have welcomed me here to speak with you today. This is a surreal moment for me. When I think back to 2 years ago, this was not part of my life plan, that's for certain. Ironically enough, similar to Dr. Panesi losing her job over a violation of what she held to be her ethics, I'm about to lose mine, and my primary responsibility for the last 8 years was supporting protection of our Prime Minister. The irony is not lost on me, and probably not lost on him either. So, as mentioned earlier, I've been a Mountie for roughly 15 years. And as a Mountie, I always felt it was very important that I know what my legal authorities are, and that police officers should know exactly what authority they have to do what they do. So I've spent a fair amount of time researching the different legislation surrounding what we're currently dealing with. And two things that I've thought I'd like to mention that stood out to me when reviewing the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act in Ontario and the Federal Emergencies Act is that both of those very early on in the legislation have subsections that detail how both are subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I would like to just read the paragraph 3 of the Emergencies Act to you. Whereas the Governor and Council, in taking such special temporary measures, would be subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged even in a national emergency. So, throughout my career and my training, everything we do has to be guided by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, whether it is involving investigation or even a lawful arrest, which can lead to use of force. If we wander outside the boundaries of the Charter, we can lose a case, even a very serious one, such as a homicide, or we can get ourselves into some real trouble if we use force on someone and it's not justified under the Charter. The Charter guarantees our rights and freedoms, the most fundamental, and it is subject only to reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. I recently heard former Premier of Newfoundland, Brian Peckford, say very clearly that they have failed to demonstrably justify their infringements on our fundamental freedoms. The fundamental freedoms include conscience and religion, thought, belief, opinion, and expression, peaceful assembly and association. There's many, but I'll hit on the key ones that I think are germane to the current situation. Our mobility rights, where every citizen has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. Our legal rights, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Section 8, everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. That's a big one in the police world. And when I read that, I can't help but think of people who are not even law enforcement demanding your private medical information at the door of a hockey rink. What legal authority do they have to demand that information from you? I certainly never had any training or direction in my law enforcement career that indicated to me that I had the right to demand that from someone. In fact, if I wanted to get medical information from a victim of a crime, I had to obtain written consent to deliver to the hospital. Or I had to obtain it by a warrant for a suspect who was potentially involved in a serious violent crime. And the criteria to obtain a DNA warrant, which I have done in my career, is extremely high, the criteria. And you have to follow very specific measures and steps in order to obtain the DNA lawfully so that the courts will accept it as admissible. Everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned.